Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts, which we do every single week on Saturday mornings without missing one.
Consummate professionals.
So we're back. I'm mostly healthy at this point, but my goodness, there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. Jumping in though, I was laughing. I ordered Chinese food, which is not something I normally do. And I'm cracking up because I opened up the menu on this restaurant, and immediately, what do you think I'm greeted with? The AI helper to help me through my choices. And it was at this point I started asking the question, at what point is it too much AI? It just seems like everything now has an AI component, and it is like the bare, like, it's awful. It's everywhere.
So can we call this Web 4.0, where instead of everything being blockchain, everything is AI then? Like we've jumped, like we basically Web 3.0 totally jumped the shark, and we just decided to move on, and we're going to go with like the Windows model now of skipping every other version number. And so the next version is going to be Web 6.0 instead of 5.0. And it'll be like augmented reality where everything comes in through, glasses or whatever.
I mean, I could actually. So here's the thing: is you may be onto something. I don't mean this in a goofy way, actually, because I have not used Google. Like for a long time, I was using Google with the word Reddit afterwards, but now with like ChatGPT's search function, I have yet to use Google for a very long time now. Google's dead to me. I actually have I have zero use to that. And go on.
The only time I'll butt in to say the only time I still use Google is explicitly for things that are not likely to be in the training data for whatever reason. And you get a sense of when that's going to happen, but it is very obtuse. Like I almost always default to some kind of AI model.
If you use the search feature in ChatGPT now, it searches sources. So you can have the latest sources. Yeah. And you know how I know this? Because I have $100 of your money in my pocket now.
Yeah, that's true.
So for context, Gowrie, or do you want to explain the bet?
Yeah. So during the election just happened, and what, it doesn't matter which way it went. It's like we're not going to talk about that on stream. However, I ran a little contest for my friends and my private Discord. And it said like, oh, win Gowrie's money. I'll put up $100. And here is the sheet of predictions. And there were 30 predictions you could make about Senate races and House races and the House margin and the popular vote margin and et cetera. And I got a bunch of takers, like 20 people put their guesses in. Came down to 2 people at the end. And the one person who won, who got the most right, and I think right now it's looking like you'll have about 21 out of 30 questions correct, was Silk. And so Silk won my money because of course he did. But then I learned afterwards that it wasn't Silk who won my money. It was ChatGPT.
And what was so great about this is when I care, but I don't care as far as like I don't need, there's no purpose for me doing the analysis. I take the Stoics approach, which is like I have very little impact on other states and other like whatever happens in Pennsylvania. It's not like I can vote there or anything like that.
Yeah.
So like I care, but I don't care. I care about the overall numbers. So going through methodically and going like, what's the chances of this person winning and this person winning? Like, but people are like debating in the chat saying, oh, I think it's this. I think it's this. And then there's just me who I took the laziest way you could, which was copy and paste the entire thing in a ChatGPT. And I used the search function, which pulled all like the first page of Google essentially. Like I shared with the resources with you. They weren't conservative resources. They were just kind of like the front page of Google. And it was really accurate, like remarkably accurate.
Let me look up just one thing, just to note. Like when we say that, I said he got 21 out of 30 responses correct. But the ones that he didn't get correct were things that you couldn't possibly predict. Things like who's going to call the race first,
Mhm.
and like it was like AP or Fox News or ABC or whatever. Like there's no statistical reasoning behind that. It's just like who's going to get there first. There's no way he could do that. Um, you could guess the electoral votes. You got that wrong.
The kicker though is there though. I took exception to that one because if you got it, what it did was if I got one of the states wrong, that was going to be wrong as well.
Most likely, yeah. Well, yeah. So if it did the balance, like there were a lot of people that hedged their bets and they answered one way on states and they answered differently on the margin to kind of, oh, if I get
Mhm.
this state wrong, I'll still be in this range and it'll be fine. That's also why I set things up that way. And yeah, so basically, like if you got one state wrong or one Senate race wrong, you got like 3 questions wrong. And so realistically, the max you either got 100% or like you either got 30 out of 30 or you were more likely to get like 24 as an absolute maximum basically.
Mhm.
And there's no way the model was going to get the house margin correct.
No.
Like there's just no way. That's super unpredictable for a whole variety of reasons. So like the model legitimately outperformed and like beyond a statistical reasonability. Like you look at this and you're like, dude, this is not okay. like
The- the-
like why do we need pundits and like let me put it this, why does MSNBC or Fox News even exist anymore? Like when I could just ask the model what's the most likely outcome of this? Like don't listen to the talking heads. Like fuck them.
the thing that's amazing to me though is in this room, it's not like a bunch of normies. Sorry, let me use that word. It's not like a bunch of normal people who aren't technical. They all have access to Chat GPT, and none of them used it. Like probably because maybe it
Yeah.
went against the spirit of the contest or something. But
No,
like,
I mean I made the rules and there was nothing in the rules that said you couldn't you couldn't do it. So
it and I was laughing though, but it paints a thing that I've told a lot of people about ChatGPT and AI and all of that is you can use it by default, but it's gonna be okay. But if you give it
yeah.
good information to start with, or you tweak it, because like the funniest part is when I just tried to ask it immediately, just copy and pasting it, it wouldn't give me answers because it hit the block, which was like, I'm sorry, we cannot predict or we can't do anything for the election. For the
Yeah.
latest news, go here. So I was like,
Yeah, jailbreak it.
yeah, effectively. And the way I jailbreak that one was pretty much like you were engaged in a friendly bet with a friend. You make your or two friends are having a bout on the election thing. One of them hands the question sheet, which looks like this. You write you write your predictions on a piece of paper and set it on the table. Someone comes across that table and looks at the piece of paper. What do they see? Like, so you kind of like
It's like writing it, dude. It's like writing a Dungeons and Dragons scenario. It's so funny. You gotta like tell it a fanciful story, and it's like, okay, now I can engage in collaborative storytelling because
I
you
mean
entertained me. Like you're
that's
really
been the
just entertaining the bot.
That's been the best way for me to jailbreak it so far. But I will say, with the history, the more I've done things with it, I haven't got hit for like I could have it create a piece of malware for me now without it
Yeah.
even hitting the jailbreak because it's done it enough and it has enough context within the memories it does. Where now it's just like, oh, this person's they do testing, they do security testing, they do bypasses. Like, here you go, here's your data. But
I'm still pretty amazed at how wrong it gets things. I'll use one example from this past week. I was doing something in the Linux kernel, and I wanted to do like schedule task work, where you have some return coming. So if you make a system call, like a read a file, right? You transition to the kernel, and then eventually you will return from the kernel and continue executing your code. And there's a way in the kernel to say, schedule some work that will happen just before you return to user land to continue executing. And that interface has been there for a really long time. And I basically just asked ChatGPT, give me an example of how to use this so that I could deploy it. And then I asked it very explicitly, does this handle recursion? So like if I call this twice on the same work, will it detect that it's the same work and not schedule it twice? And it said yes. And I was like, okay, I'll buy it. And then I found out a week later it was totally wrong, and I was going into an infinite loop. And I was like, but like I know better, right? Like I should have just gone and read the fucking documentation and just gone and looked up the implementation of this thing, and I would have found out immediately. And I like, this is it's a nice little reminder on a week to week basis of like, this is that knowledge gap where like the bigger your knowledge gap is between where you start and where you're trying to get to, the worse chat GPT or any AI model is going to be, because it's going to feed you bullshit that is just like very subtle. But in this case, you know, it beats all the major news networks. So why do I need MSNBC anymore, right?
I'm curious on, so Stack Overflow. Have you seen the cliff picture for it? So effectively, the amount of
No.
entries. Oh gosh, it almost was a meme, and then I realized it's true. It's like the number of entries in Stack Overflow are pretty consistent, and then the release of ChatGPT came out, and then it's just like
Well,
way down.
didn't Chegg just go under? Was it the one of the, I think the bookmakers for college, or the people that do cliff notes and like allow for searching through them, they just completely went under. Was it
No, I didn't
Chegg?
hear that. Callie Parrott. I'm looking at this comment right now. Researcher Dan, I'm not. Meisler. That's going to be. I think that's what it is. Maintainer of all word lists on Callie, Parrot, etc. has a great LLM agent tool called Fabric, which makes using AI and LLMs easy. I'm guessing. Oh, probably to search through his information and research, make custom word lists. Like, I think that's where AI thrives. It's very good at taking mass amounts of unstructured data and creating structure around it. I think the one which blew me away recently was there was a company hard coded a lot of private data within a .js file, but it was within it was this 50 megabyte file, but it was a crazy format. Effectively, all the data went into an array at the bottom, but it was some proprietary Microsoft language which wasn't easily understood, and I just wanted to extract the data. So I grabbed the format of it, said, "All right, here's JS. Can you extract this into a CSV?" Again, gave a sample of it, and then give me a Python script to be able to run against the original file. Boop, double click, and it did it. It was incredible because it's good at doing stuff like that. And I think a lot, again, going back to the Chinese restaurant, like there are stupid uses to it. And that's fine. If I had a Chinese restaurant, I would probably be trying to put AI in my egg foo young as well. But I think some of the uses are still, we have a solution and we're searching for a really good problem for it. I think same thing with blockchain. We have a solution. We're in search of an actual problem for it, and we haven't found it yet. With AI, we have, but I think like things like Claude, like have you seen the new Claude computer control feature?
No.
So
Explain.
long story short,
Let's pretend I haven't, and that you need to explain it to somebody who has no idea what you're talking about. Let's just pretend for a second.
You have imagine it this way: you have Claude, ChatGPT, Claude through Anthropic, so it's just another version of it on one side, and then a VM on the other. I think it's actually a Dockerized container, but you have a VM on the other side. I say, go and check the latest price for headphones on Amazon.com. It's really simple how it works because it works like the O1 model on ChatGPT where it feeds back in and uses the input as the prompt for the next one. So it takes a screenshot of the computer. It goes, I need to surf the web. Screenshot. Oh, Firefox is down at the bottom. I need to move the mouse down and over. Take another screenshot. Yep, I'm now centered on it. Click. Boop. Opens Firefox. Take another screenshot. Where's the address bar? Cool. I need to go up. I need to click. I need to go to Amazon. So all it is like screenshots and response. So it's not complicated. It's not like you have to massively script this thing. It's not a proprietary language. It's I can, with natural language, have it go do computer tasks. The only downside to it right now is like it's a million tokens to do like simple things. Like it will cost you $5 to surf the web type of thing. But imagine like go create a dossier on Gowrie or on Alex on Silk, like, go do this. And it will grab screenshots, pull the data in, go in, and it will learn. But it has now access to a computer and the internet in a way it didn't have it before. Like, and this is open. This is open. Anyone can do this now. This isn't like over there or secret proprietary. Eventually it will come out. You can go do this right now in beta. And we now have a very cool solution, and we haven't had time to truly go, what problems does it solve?
Yeah.
We're in a really cool spot right now.
Well, like there are places that it's already been used and that I think are really functional, but I think that people are really worried about. And we were talking about this just before stream with like music generation. And there's lots of memes, lots of channels that are using this to generate meme songs and stuff. But like in terms of productivity and actually helping artists work through the process, I had a really cool experience while I was, if you watch the beginning of this stream, you'll hear one of my songs. That one was just me playing the guitar and singing. But we have a variety of songs we were playing before, and I was explaining to Silk, sitting down with my producer and watching him work in Logic, where he plunked in a little bit of guitar work on top of one of my songs after we worked out the rough shape of things. And then he's like, all right, let's decide what style of drums we want. And he just basically opens up an AI drummer that has a couple of like rough presets. And then there's like a dial that you drag around. You're like, oh, I want it more aggressive, or I want it less aggressive, or I want it, more dry or like more jazzy or whatever. And the drummer takes in what you've played already, adjusts the rhythm that it's intending to play around what you've already played, and then pumps it through a number of filters to generate the rough shape of what you're looking for. Obviously, it'll be hyper generalized, but as a result, like we're blocked on this, like, oh, how are drums going to fit into this space? And he's like, no, hold on, plunk, plunk, plunk. Here, we have a drum line now. And we can just move on with the rest of, let's put some more guitars down. Let's put some bass down. Let's do the vocals. Let's do all the creative stuff. And then he came back around and then replaced the drums with himself playing the drums because Neil's awesome. He does all of the things. But I had this moment where I was like, one, that's really cool. And you now have a one-man shop in the course of an hour where you can just like, if you don't know drums, you don't have to wait for a session player. You can just have something generate it for you and not spend hours painstakingly going through and programming the drums yourself and then come back around and fill it in. But the downside of that is, like, normally you would have live sessions with a drummer and you'd be like, oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? And then you would eventually come up with something creative to fill that space. Now what this will turn into is you have the robo drummer, the AI drummer, put down a reference track, and then you show up in the studio with a session drummer and say, here's the reference track, play something that fits in the space like this reference track, but then put your own little flair on it. It's less space for creativity, right? And so you have to wonder, like, that solves a legitimate problem. We've found a legitimate problem in the workflow of a musician that it solves, but it's going to disrupt so many other pieces of the system and potentially remove creativity from other portions of the process. Very interesting. Very interesting. Go ahead.
I don't know if I agree. I think it's going to, like, if you have a good drummer, again, kind of in the same way of sports ball, music is so not my area of expertise. But I imagine if you have a good drummer, they're going to hear the music and then lay down a drum beat. And you could give them any music. And this is why we have remixes right now. I don't know why, but my workout, there it is. There we go. Dropped it right there. My workout mix is like all remixes right now. And because of that, it's like Higher Love with a like remix background to it. Or like, I don't know why this is the music I have playing, like a Prayer and like Madonna's like in my thing getting remixed at this point. But someone came along and said, okay, I hear this music, I'm going to remix it. If the drummer is a good drummer, they're going to hear your music and go, okay, I hear the drums, but this isn't as good as whatever it is, that thing.
Well, so here's the problem, right? The actual core problem, this has existed, this particular issue has existed for quite a bit of time in the movie industry, because while they're laying out the structure of a movie, they won't have the real soundtrack for the movie already built. So what they'll do is they'll like, well, we want something that's like Hans Zimmer, so we'll just take a reference track from Hans Zimmer, plunk it in, and then they'll edit the movie around the soundtrack that is not going to be the soundtrack. And so it ties the new soundtrack writers' hands into a rough structure of things, rather than doing code development and saying, oh, actually, I'm going to change this other piece so that it fits better with the music, or I'm going to change the music that fits better this way, or whatever. It's kind of the same problem, but now it's, tying an individual drummer's hands, not even just the conductor's hands, or the what is the term? I can't think of the term. Anyway, you get the idea, where you walk into a creative session and you're basically saying to them, here's the shape of things. You can change it, but only within these parameters. And that you can still get creative, but it doesn't feel as creative, and it starts to make everything sound more and more alike. Like, that's the danger of it, is we're just going to have less because of this. We'll have more variety of music that is being pumped out by fewer people, but more and more of it is going to sound the same because they're all starting from a similar base, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, there's two pieces I want to think on this. The first is, you bring up a point which I agree with, which is the generalization. I don't know if that's a word. The generalization of information, because this is one big problem with AI, with large language models, whatever, is that we're taking large amounts of data and we're boiling them down. Like, and this has happened with, like, oh gosh, like recipes and stuff like that. Same thing. Like, eventually your grandmother's apple pie, when you look up at it online, is just now the same recipe as everyone else's, because it's just been genericized over and over and over again. Yep. Content online will get more and more and more and more generic. However, what happens when you have an outlier, like when you have someone who actually creates something truly original, whether they use large language or not, is it's an outlier, and it does really, really well. So I think, like, you get a lot of that noise.
I think there's a lot of survivorship bias in that, though. Like, you see the one outlier that does really, really well, and then there's a shitload of outliers that never get seen by anybody.
That's true, but that's same with books too. You look at Amazon. True. You deliver a book, it can be an incredible book, but like, this is such a weird problem too, even on YouTube and things like that. Like, you can be an incredible. So I did that YouTube course when I was doing it and things like that, which was like, something they kept saying was title and thumbnail, title and thumbnail, title and thumbnail. And I was like, yeah, but but I want the content to be good. Like, and they go, it doesn't matter, because if no one clicks on the cover, if no one picks up the book, no one's going to know how good it is. So all of a sudden on the music face, you could have the best song ever. But if you don't do all the marketing and advertisement and face on it too, it will never get heard. And I guess in some ways it stinks, because now you have to look at all that stuff that way. Either way, point being, going down to, like, I agree, there is this generalization. And the other thing, which is kind of goofy though, is this only makes a difference on the art side of things. Anything which falls into AI generated art, AI generated music, AI, that, like, the art side. But then there's, like, we'll call it the mathematic analytics programming. Like, you can have very elegant programming. Don't get me wrong. ChatGPT might come up with some really dumb programming, but it still works. This is a minimal viable product. I think within our lifetime, actually, I'll even argue within the next 5 years, say in the next 5 years, maybe even less, there'll be a solo entrepreneur who becomes the world's first solo billionaire, and it will be an AI company.
I'd be surprised if that hasn't already happened, but
I don't think it has.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. You're probably right. It hasn't happened. Oh, he is gone.
I'm still here.
Well,
I think
it turns
you still
out,
hear me.
As it turns out, Silk himself is actually an AI.
I'm gonna restart this.
Except we can't say he's a large language model. He's more of a small language model. His vocabulary is very limited. Um, I guess it's
Incredible.
just me solo on the broadcast now. That's great. No,
Do you
I
hear
think
me
you're
right now?
probably right about that. Yes, I do.
Oh, okay.
Um, I'm at solo video, and everyone can look out into my house now. It's great. Um, no, I think you're right. I think we'll probably see the first like solo billionaire to an extent. Like, how do you define that really? Um, like, you're still going to need help to get your business into different situations. We'll say, like, you're still going to have people in the loop. They may just not be employees. You may try to replace those employees, but then like there's enough AI slop that I think it's going to be really difficult to get over some major hurdles. Also, like I'll say, I'm going to say something absurd now. It's just like, does becoming a billionaire actually mean anything in modern society when someone's probably going to be the first trillionaire? Uh, like it feels almost the same as saying like, oh, someone's gonna be the first self-made millionaire. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't feel like anything anymore. I don't know. What an absurd sentence that is. Uh,
Yeah, I am. I am. By the way, I am staring at the device, and I think it had a firmware issue, which is
oh, fun.
fantastic. But it does look like it's coming back up now.
Well, you should go ask ChatGPT how to fix it.
Oh,
Uh,
incredible! There we go.
there you go.
Hi. I just had to. There's nothing like you just had to rip out the hard drive, and now it comes back
So,
up because apparently that's a
so,
thing now.
so on your last thought in terms of informatics and all of those things, I have a friend who is a statistician by trade, and he teaches at a university, and he has talked about how he's been redoing a lot of his coursework to integrate some of these AI models to get his students to realize like there is a better way to do this work now. And if you are stuck on anything for longer than 10 minutes, just fucking ask the AI model for something
Mhm.
because you're missing some piece of information and just like give it everything. Just like he even said like, oh, I spent like an hour or 2 hours coming up with this question and then I was just curious and I copy and pasted it in the chat GPT and it spit out almost exactly my exact handwritten program that I solved this with. And he's just like, wow, this is, he's like, I've really started to learn like what I really should have done was copy my program and then have it generate the question. So it saved me 2 hours from writing it, the exact things. Cause you run into the problem. We've said this before. The biggest problem with these models is almost the peanut butter sandwich problem, where you have your kid teach your kid about ambiguity by getting them to tell you how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And they're like, you get the bread, you spread the peanut butter on it, you put the bread together, and then you eat the sandwich. And so you spread the peanut butter on the outside of the bread, you put it together backwards so you get peanut butter all
Mhm.
over your hands, and then you start eating sandwich. You're like, no, that's not how it works, right? Like that's kind of how it feels to work with an AI model a little bit. And so he's realizing like, no, it's actually getting really good at avoiding some of these problems recently.
Mhm. Well, especially like the
So
feedback where that one where it will take your output and feed it back in the input. I mean, it's interesting. So my kids are in school. They're too young to have to deal with this yet. But I remember in school where I had a teacher saying, You're not allowed to use Google. You're not allowed to
Wikipedia.
use Wikipedia. You're not allowed to use any number of these online tools. It's like, you make the same argument that everyone made in the Encyclopedia. Pluto is still a planet, which I still take exception to. But is you can't use this you can't use this tool. You can't use this tool. In how long is it going to be where teachers? I guarantee it. I don't know if anyone's in chat who knows students who are in high school who are dealing with this. You can't use AI to help write the paper. I get why you can't use AI to write the entire paper for you,
Yeah.
but why can't I use it as a resource to help grammar check? You can use Grammarly and all these other things to help like grammar check your reports. I am curious how much stuff overnight, like how many course assignments became useless. I mean, screw
Oh
that.
yeah.
Look at DEF
Well,
CON contests.
yeah. We just did this at DEF CON where Silk and I we went around, we did the goon thing, we took pictures, we took some video, we had fun, and then I think it was Saturday night we both looked at each other and we're like, do you want to go win a contest? And we were just like, do you want to go win a contest? And we were like, okay, let's go play this contest. And then every single thing that came up, we were like, I'm not even going to read this. I'm just going to plunk it into ChatGPT and see what it spits out. And I want to say over the course of about 100 questions, maybe 5 to 10 actually required us to think.
Yeah.
Because ChatGPT just spat out the right question, right answer.
And then of those 5, we found out like 2 of them actually had a problem in the cipher.
Yeah. And like, and then the other 3 were all steganography. And that's why we were like, fuck steganography. Always fuck steganography. Oh, I can't say that word. I hate stego. It's just sucks.
Well, it's because every single time, like I love CTFs. I have a lot of fun with them and all of that. But stego is one of the biggest cop outs because it's a needle in a haystack, because you're looking for
a needle in a needle stack.
Well, I mean, what tool? Like, I know the data's stored in the image. Like, you're like, I know it's stored in the image. Is it in the metadata? Is it tagged at the end? If I open up the hex editor, if I run strings on it, I've done all of those things. Is it camouflage? Is it stag hide? Is it, insert some online tool? Then after you do that, you have to play the algorithm game. You're like, is it HMAC? Is it this? Is it this? And you're just like, you finally find the right tool, but there's an infinite number of tools. Like, call it like there's 10 tools. If there's 10 tools and each one has 10 ciphers, I have 100 combinations. And if I just so happen to we've even had ones where if you download it through Chrome, it wasn't the same as if you downloaded it through wget, because it would screw with like some random byte, or it would be compressed, or like the worst one we ever did was they published the app through Hugo, which is like a Python static site generator, and it did image optimization when it posted it. So which completely decimated the stego. No, it's there because every time they tested it, they would go open up their local dev environment and right click it there, and never tested it in production. Stego's so terrible. But I do think there's
for
so
watchers
many
that are developing CTFs, don't do stego. Stego's just the worst.
I think there is massive chunks of problems that were solved overnight with something like ChatGPT. But I'm curious what the balance is for learning new things versus just like, let's use the example of a calculator. Your teacher's like, you're not walking around with a calculator in your pocket. Sure enough, we're all walking around with a calculator in our pocket.
No. We're not walking around with a calculator in our pocket. We're walking around with a fucking supercomputer in our pocket. Completely different.
So like which also can run ChatGPT. You want, at a certain point, you do need to be able to do math in your head. Like you do. You need to be able to calculate change. You really don't have to calculate change. We don't use money anymore. We just use credit cards.
So here's the actual balance. I know where you're going with this. Here's the actual balance. And this happened for me about a year ago when I was trying to analyze a mathematic problem of cost versus value, like opportunity cost of like what happens when we put a server that looks like this in the rack versus a server that looks like that in a rack, like the difference between these two servers. And I realized as we were going through it, everyone was focused on one component of the cost, and no one had thought about the opportunity cost of, well, if I put 3 U's of units in this rack that are taken up by this shape, it displaces what else could take up those 3 U's in that same rack. And so I went and found some comps that were like, well, what is the best I can do with a single pizza box 1U server and just take up those same 3 U's? And I went, oh, this makes no sense. Why would you do this when you could go get like 100 or 300 more cores in the same space, or X amount more memory in the same space? And I realized in that moment, I was like, oh, this is a calculus problem. There's like, you could figure out the way to do this maximization problem in calculus. Can I do it? No. But if I found a mathematician who was used to looking at problems like this and formulating what that looked like, you could figure that out. The only reason why I was able to look at this problem and say, oh, this is a calculus problem, you could write a maximization function that would tell you what this approximate opportunity cost is because I took 2 semesters of calculus. And I understood how to do that at some point. Do I know how to do it now? No, but I know the shape of things. And so that's where the balance has to come in, where it's like it's actually still useful to go learn the manual components of this, not because you're going to have to do it manually, but because when you look at a problem, you understand the rough shape of the problem and what the solution is likely to look like, so that when you go to ChatGPT, you can go, I have a problem that is shaped this, and I want you to use this mechanism to do it and spit out the result of blah. And you give it the rough shape of things, and then it's really good at like telling you how wrong you are.
I think I think it's really good about understanding what and how. I
Yeah.
don't think it has any ability to do why. It's
No.
almost like the
Well,
same
of course.
problems that exist within like DAST tools, which are like dynamic web application testing tools. Is they're really good about finding very like input validation and things like that, but they have zero ability to answer the question. If I log in as a low level user and I go to /admin and then I can do all the admin features from a low privilege user, it's never going to flag that as a vulnerability because it doesn't know, like, just because I can do that doesn't mean
Well,
I should be able to do that. It doesn't know the
yeah, there's
the why of
the
it.
intent. No, it's the
Mhm.
intent. Like, and this is why I've always said, I don't think anyone that says the house of cards is falling and that the AI is coming for your programming job just fundamentally doesn't understand the problem you're trying to solve in programming. 90% of the problem you're trying to solve is understanding what your intent is before you even write that first if statement,
Mm.
because your intent identify like defines the entire shape of the problem. Once you identify what your actual intent is and you write that statement down, you have like 10% of the work left to do, which is actually writing the code. Um, and so, yeah, that's the hardest part. But that's the make a peanut butter sandwich problem in its core, is like, oh, you got to go through 5 or 6 different iterations to get the shape of the problem that you actually are trying to solve, and then be very explicit about it.
I, I
Um,
still I still think if you do ever give it access to try and figure out why, it will come up with every logical fallacy under the sun. It will be this is how the sci-fi, like the robots are going to kill all the humans. Humans kill humans. Therefore, best solution to stop humans from killing humans is just kill everyone. And
yeah,
there's
it's
going
kill
to
the
be
human.
a lot of those type of problems within programming where it's like, oh, the database is going slow and it takes too much time to like query it from the front end. Therefore, I should just compile all the back end information into the front end and give it all to the user so they don't even have to access the server.
I like the idea of people have talked about having AI moderators on various social media and like
Oh,
YouTube and stuff
goodness.
like that. And I always think it's really funny because one of the things that started happening on YouTube in particular is they started not demonetizing, but like pushing your listing further and further down in the recommendation engine based on what words you used. And so that's why people started using the word unalived, because the word that they were replacing it with was being, if you had it in the stream or you had it in the description or in any way, even if you were having a totally reasonable conversation about it, the fact that you use that word, your recommendation now just like tanks. Right. And so people started using other words as euphemisms. And then it's going to turn into this giant cat and mouse game. And like, it's so fascinating because it's like, we'll say modern, like not cancel culture, but it's like that on steroids, where you're just going to have these two groups, the AI moderators and humans, trying to like just go back and forth because people are trying to figure out how to game the system. And that's what we all naturally do. And that's just a great example of
Awesome.
like, yeah, but the intent is what is the actual intent of this? The intent is really stupid, which is like trying to moderate who. It's not stupid. It's trying to moderate what type of content is presented to certain people, and in
Mhm.
particular kids, right? And
Which
so the
which
intent is very good, but the execution of it is very dumb.
I get the like that would be like there's certain problems I've come across in my career where I go, that's a fun problem to solve. Like I remember like at GE when I was there, where it was at the time I was there, they had like 600,000 endpoints exposed to the internet. How do you defend against that?
You can't.
Like, it was the thing is they eventually just said you can't. We have to assume there's bad actors inside the network at all times. And pretty much in every major enterprise comes to this exact same conclusion. Like there's no way of doing it. YouTube has, I forgot what the statistic was, like 100 hours every second, 1,000 hours every second, whatever it was. Stupid amounts of video uploaded every minute. And how do you defend against that? You have to come up with these random, like, I'm going to just massively sweep through this entire thing and fix it best way I can. I think one of the funniest ones I saw for
every
500 hours every minute. Sheesh. Like that's a lot to defend against. And I guarantee
that was in 2022.
Sheesh. And I guarantee a lot of the solutions are always the dumbest ones. Like I think my favorite solution I have ever seen for and recommended for brute forcing logins. This is before you could do like geolocation and CAPTCHA and two-factor wasn't really a thing yet. Was just delay the login function, like add a wait at the top of a quarter of a second. Because most users, a quarter of a second, they're never notice, but it makes it so all of a sudden brute forcing through 50,000 logins is now takes forever.
Yep.
So like some of these dumb solutions I could see them coming up with. And again, they start going, oh,
that's not here's the thing. That's not a dumb solution, right? Like just to be
it's
clear,
a great solution.
That is a very functional and smart solution. And this just goes back to the saying, don't do dumb things and do even fewer clever things. All of the other things that you're thinking about fall in the clever scenario, where it's like, I'm going to be clever about how I solve this problem. No, just put a fucking quarter-second delay in. It's fine.
Yeah. So when I say dumb, elegant, that's the word. It's an elegant solution, but dumb solution because it was like so stupidly easy. It was just so obviously there. It wasn't bouncing a laser off the moon. It was just like something so stupid in front of you.
It's the terminology in parallel system development would be embarrassingly parallel, right? Where like where the idea is just like, rather than trying to get fancy and use many threads that are accessing shared memory, no, you just split up the data set and run 2 copies of the same program. It's embarrassingly parallel because of how simple it is, but it's not stupid if it works. So in this case, it's like embarrassingly easy to defend against this problem. And if you told somebody this was your solution and they were like, no, it has to be more complex than that. This is how you test how well somebody actually knows their job. It's just like the best engineers in this space will be like, it's not stupid if it works. So just do something and move on.
I'm moving to a different topic. Arkan says, I have heard that there are some worried that this will create plausible deniability. Say for downloading certain content, I didn't download that. My AI did. Not sure I'd buy it, but that. I'll summarize is eventually having AI do something that you're not supposed to do and then being able to hide behind, that wasn't me. That was my AI.
I think this a court case for this will eventually show up for sure. And I think that is going to be very complicated, but I think our laws already cover that through, we'll use piracy as an example. Right now, the court cases have shown that, like, if you're consuming, aka you go to a streaming website and you watch something on a streaming website, you're not culpable because you're not actually distributing the content. Or at least you're not criminally culpable for watching it. It would be very difficult. It would be very difficult for a case to be brought against you just for watching it. And the argument against it would be, well, actually, you are creating a copy of it because it's in your local caches on your system, and Chrome keeps a copy of videos somewhere buried in your system, and therefore you've created a copy, and that is violation of copyright law. I believe a court case already exists that says, no, that's not a violation because the intent was to just watch it and not create a copy for distribution. Obviously, the person who's actually streaming it is absolutely violating copyright law, but the person who downloaded it isn't. So, like, one of the pieces of a criminal case is intent for violation of certain statutes. And if you can't prove intent, it you don't always have to have intent. There are certain types of criminal things that remove intent, or sorry, that don't require explicit intent. We'll just take like reckless driving. If you kill someone, you weren't necessarily intending to kill somebody, so it's manslaughter versus murder, right? Like that would be a good example of like where intent matters and what type of thing you get charged with. And in this case, uh, yeah, you probably have a question of intent. What did you intend for the thing to do? And then what did it actually do? I think it ultimately comes out to like, what is the level of your negligence as to whether or not it rises to the level of violation of crime. Now, that said, when you're saying, oh, I had plausible deniability, and what you're really saying there is just like this person has an actual intent to do these things, but they structure in a way that they have plausible deniability. I have news for you. That exists in every facet of life. Like people are already doing this. This is just one more tool for them to engage in this type of thing. So yeah, I don't really worry too much about that because it'll come out it'll come out eventually.
Braden had mentioned an airline actually tried to hide behind their AI chatbot and gave a customer the wrong answer. It had to do with bereavement travel discount. I think this one, it's a little bit different because there's one I'm forcing the AI to do something that I may have plausible deniability for versus like a company set up an AI, pointed it to their internal documentation, and then it just started giving wrong answers.
Yeah.
I a little bit different, but at the same time, I get the, there's going to be so many of these things where I think like for the large language models, which you're pulling data out, like they're read only, they're going to have these weird anomalies because you have to always have like some of their general model incorporated into your existing data. And they're not necessarily great if they're not programmed correctly to not use some of the general information inside your data because it lacks all the context within your data. So it has to use external data.
I'd also like Michelle will sometimes bring this up. There was some law that was passed for healthcare and the way they could charge different bills in different ways, or no, it was funding for certain departments within military healthcare at one point, and Congress screwed up and didn't include an Oxford comma in one sentence in a bill, and it changed the entire meaning of a particular sentence. And so if the AI doesn't like truthfully generate the exact copy and paste of something, or it takes multiple components out from different spots and jumbles it together, it can create brand new context that didn't exist because it took many things out and then derived some answer that you're just like, actually, that doesn't follow from the way the content was originally generated. And I think a lot of those problems are going to show up for sure. It's going to cause a lot of issues.
Commas make the biggest difference. Let's eat Gowrie. Let's eat Gowrie.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's going to be a lot of weird uses we put into two, but like, again, I think what's so interesting to me right now is we're living in this area where like you can do amazing things with very little effort, especially when it's dealing with like high unstructured data. Like I think, again, I go back to you have a single person who makes over, I mean, it's already been shown within a SaaS solution to make 7 figures in your one person in their basement. I think it's even been shown that it's been 8 figures in their basement. I'll be curious when you get to the 9 figures, 10 figures from one individual running a SaaS solution in their basement. We haven't seen it yet. I still think,
the hardest part about doing that is identifying the problem that is worth $1 billion. It's really like to get to I'll put it this way, to get to $1 million, to get to $10 million, you can have a relatively narrow problem that solves a big issue for a small number of people. I think to get to $1 billion, you have to solve something that provides a lot of value to a lot of people. And that is very, very hard to do as an individual without access to a lot more data. Can it be done? Absolutely. But you would have to we would all have to be overlooking something really dramatic Like
Mhm.
that
Oh, and I think
isn't just obviously staring us in the face.
most simple problems have been solved at this point. Like we've invented the wheel. We can
Most
only
most simple problems have been resolved ad nauseum at this
Mhm.
point.
Like we're at the point where there's going to be you have to do something radical. And I use the example of this. Like automobile tires have gotten as efficient as they can for price, distance, wearability, all of that. You're going to have to go to an airless tire, which is going to take a tremendous amount of time. Like, again, I don't know that space, but my point is like same thing with computers. We hit this diminishing return. We then came out with the ARM processor that shoved us way higher. Now to go one step farther is going to be great, but like that's a very, very, very difficult problem to solve. I think for this is like I think it's going to be within large language, but the kicker is I think that some big company is going to snatch it up. Say it's like medical diagnosis. Oh gosh, did you see the article recently? I think I shared that
Yeah.
one, which was
The chatbot that is capable of getting better outcomes than just the chatbot, or like the chatbot by itself being better than a chatbot with a doctor.
this is a
Is it
good
that one?
yeah, it's that one. It's a good example because it's the same thing with a programmer, which is you go in there. So the main problem, which is doctors hit with it, and why AI was better at doing diagnostics than the doctors, was because most doctors their initial guess, they would go out to prove their initial guess and not let the data speak for itself. Where the bot could care less what the initial guess was, would always kind of reuse the data. And I think the same thing happens with programming is us going, here is the problem I need you to solve. And it goes, yep, cool, I can solve that.
Yeah.
And not giving it the additional context where I'm not seeing the problem. But yeah, that one was an interesting one. But like, let's say you came up with a Dr. MD AI bot. The moment your company becomes even a little bit bigger, you're going to have WebMD buy it. Or they're definitely already developing one if it's not already on the site right now. So I think the
Well,
one that's going to have to stand
the
out will be
biggest
something
danger in
unique.
that space, though, the biggest danger in that space is when it gets it wrong, who's liable, right? So, like, those are always going to be like, oh, there's so much tremendous value here, but when a doctor gets it wrong, we have some level of understanding of like, oh, well, they're human, they can't be perfect, and so we have structures built in to our society to be like, it's a practice. They call it practicing medicine for a reason. Like, it's not a perfect science because we don't have complete data about what's going on. But as soon as you put that decision into the hands of a machine, it's a whole different social interaction where if something goes wrong, it's like, how dare you present a machine that makes critical decisions as if it's infallible, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of space for this to not crumble in on itself. I think there's going to be a lot of companies that are on the wrong side of that liability because they put too much trust in it too quickly.
Yeah, I could see that. But I also think like I would be surprised if you didn't have like it won't make the decision. You're not going to blindly. You're still going to have a
Yeah.
room of doctors who are looking over that and be like, "Yes, I agree with it." I do think like you're going to have one doctor who can do a lot more and feed the data into it. I mean, heck, like the one which always baffles me within the medical space is that we don't have again, I get the scary part of a central thing. I think this is actually what Apple was trying to do with their health app, where you could have all the doctor's data and you're be the central spot for all of this, and then you can share your entire medical record. But it's baffling to me that like our entire medical, I mean, we're going down a weird path right now, but our entire medical industry doesn't really share data. Like you really are
Yeah.
responsible
And
for your own. That you can have
yeah.
one
Which
prescribing
is
doctor percent give you one thing. Like think about it this way: you can have one doctor prescribe one thing, another doctor prescribe another thing, which completely have conflict. And the only thing to stop that is you remembering to fill out that line every six
no.
months.
Well, this is why. Well, actually, the thing that's supposed to stop you from having that problem is having both of your prescriptions sent to the same pharmacy. And
Mm.
pharmacist is the person who is actually responsible for looking at all of the things you're prescribed and being like, no, you can't have this because that doctor didn't know you were taking this other thing and this will kill
Mhm.
you. Like that's what the pharmacist job is supposed to be. Which interesting thing, you should go look at what's going on with CVS right now, because it's completely fucked. Like the whole pharmacy system is fucked, and we're probably going to end up with AI pharmacists, and that's a little terrifying,
Hmm.
for a whole variety of reasons. It's probably going to be more accurate, but like there's a whole bunch of issues in that space that are terrifying. So like I'll say AI deployment in the medical industry kind of frightens me right now for a whole variety of reasons, um, but not for the reasons you might think.
Hmm.
There, it's not like I'm not too worried about the accuracy problem, because at the end of the day, it's still going to go through a doctor. It's still going to go through the patient who's relatively decently informed, or even better informed now, because you can ask the AI to explain it like I'm five. Um, Whereas a doctor may not have the time to do that for every patient, um, or the expense would be so high. But a doctor can at least look at a form and be like, "Yeah, this is the rough shape of things. That's fine. Here, go ahead and read it, and then
Hmm.
inform yourself." Essentially, um, but yeah, I think some of the mechanics being replaced by AI is going to lead to a large systemic failure somewhere in the process that leads us to a total systemic breakdown somewhere, where like, oh, Nvidia machines start breaking, like whatever, like there is
Hmm.
some major problem in some chip, and we've put all of our eggs in one basket in terms of like AI replacing the mechanics of some of this, and then people just can't get, like physically cannot go to a pharmacy and get their thing, because the system that process it has died, because it was dependent on some chips that were supposed to be available but now aren't. Things like that.
See, but that like that stuff to me though, it's not that stuff. At least we know that's a known problem that could happen when the systems are designed. The CrowdStrike is a perfect example of a singular point of failure that impacts the
Yeah.
entire world, and no one thought of it. Like I guarantee, like when you go into the disaster recovery, like meetings and scrimmages and things like that, like the number of people who raise their hands who are prepared for a global pandemic, no one was raising their hand. Another person who's like mass virus, which takes out the entire world, no one raised their hand. And I'm not saying that's what happened with CrowdStrike, but effectively, mass virus that takes out half the world, like no one had that on their bingo card.
I
Like
mean, it's not even a virus, right? Well,
no, it
yeah.
wasn't a virus.
I
It
thought you were
wasn't.
talking about CrowdStrike. Yeah.
No, I was. I am. I'm talking about CrowdStrike. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't anything like that. But I'm saying effectively, like in the disaster recovery meeting, you wouldn't have been like, or in the scenario, you wouldn't be saying CrowdStrike breaks everything. It would be the scenario would be mass outage across the globe, which is what it was.
Yeah.
It was a mass outage of zillions of computer systems across the globe. No, it wasn't a virus. That wasn't what I was saying. I was just saying like the line item you would have on the scrimmage would be
Yeah,
like
you would
global
like what it would be
pandemic.
on the scrimmage. What the scrimmage item would be like, what if we have a cable, like what if an entire data center becomes unreachable?
Yeah, or natural disaster. We have a tornado and it
Yeah.
wipes out that. We have a giant hurricane go through and just wipes out this entire segment where it's offline for 6 months. What do we do? But the chaos monkey go through and just start ripping out cables and see what breaks. I still that was
Uh,
another one of those Twitter stories. Did you hear that one or X stories?
nope.
So the summary of the story was he wanted to shut down one of the data centers, and I don't know the truth in this one because I just saw kind of the headline, but they said it was going to be a 6 months process to roll it offline. So he was in flight and decided to just go straight to the data center, touch down, and then just started unplugging stuff and said, "Nope, we're going to do it in 6 weeks. Figure it out." But this was like in a redundant data center and got the whole thing shut down within 6 days.
Yeah. I mean, like it's real easy to shut stuff down. It's definitely harder to start it back up. uh,
With that, what else you got?
Not a whole lot. We're definitely gonna try and stream more, I think. This is more of a off the cuff stream, but we'll try and get a little more structure back. Things are starting to calm down a bit. My life is chaos right now. You can't see it from this, but like 10 feet to my right is the entire center of my house is torn down to the studs, and we're like sharing a stall shower right now, for like one stall shower for 3 people. Uh,
Yeah, ours is mine is I'm in the midst of build and property and all of that fun stuff right now. But again, it hit that glorious moment of just colds and everything else going on. And it's the end of
oh
the year
goodness.
push. With that, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you next week. And hack on.